Hello nerds and nerdettes, and welcome back to the channel where once again we have a new video for you guys. Today's video is the final installment of us recapping last year, 2024, through comics and comic books that we read. I already did designated videos on the image/indie market of comic books, as well as the big two, Marvel and DC. Those videos are my top 5 reads and releases of 2024, and I can leave the link to those videos up above or in the description down below if you want to watch those. But today's video is my top 10 reads of 2024, full stop, no other details, just everything that I've read. These are the 10 best books out of all of them. I read tons of books during 2024, not as many as I wanted to due to a lot of personal life changes that were going on, but these are going to be the 10 best books that pretty much changed my life once I read them because they are that good. Now, a quick reminder for those of you that are not aware, we do have a channel sponsor, which is organicpricebooks.com. We do have a discount code, which is staynerdy, and that can save you $2 on an order. But when you're ordering 4 or more books, which us nerds kind of tend to do, you can use the code staynerdyshipittogether to save yourself 5% on that entire order. It's a great way to save yourself some money, but those codes also do contribute to the channel. So thank you to anyone that does decide to use those codes when ordering maybe some of the books that I'm about to talk about. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into the top 10, starting with obviously number 10. And at number 10, we do have Peacemaker Tries Hard. This is a standard size hardcover, and it's published by DC, and it is a DC Black Label book. It is written by Kyle Starks and has art by Steve Pugh. Now, I am not the biggest Peacemaker fan. Other than the show, I honestly don't really care about the character. This is not a story that's going to make you a fan by any means, but man, was this a book that I needed the time that I read it. So I had a lot of big life changes going on, and I was very stressed, and this book was introduced into my life during a time that I needed some laughs, and man, did this book deliver. Kyle Starks has a very comedic tone when it comes to the character of Peacemaker, as well as the world that you're kind of adventuring through with the character of Peacemaker. And on top of that, Steve Pugh adds his very cartoony and almost ballooned like character designs to a multitude of the roster throughout this story, and both of those elements work beautifully together. And as if that wasn't enough, you then have Jordi Belair on colors, so the colors are quite literally popping off the page. So during this particular book, you are going to be following Peacemaker as he tries to rescue Bruce Wayne. There is a catch to that synopsis that I just provided, but I'm not going to give any more details so you can jump into the book and find out yourself, because it is quite hilarious to kind of find out exactly what I mean by saying that synopsis. Also through this story, you're going to have the more obscure side of DC delved into, from Chemo to the villain Snowflame, who is a villain that gets his powers from a hardcore drug substance. And then you're also going to have some ridiculous story elements delved into also, such as Peacemaker fighting Deathstroke babies. So you have a lot of fun going on here, tons of action as well to keep your attention and make sure you're enjoying the ride. I did do a review on this specific story, so I can leave that up above, but of course beware of spoilers because I do dive deep into the characters and the story that's being told. But if you don't care about spoilers, click away and watch away. But man, was this great. It's awesome for new readers. You don't need to know who Peacemaker is. You learn very quickly about little snippets of his origin and how the DC universe views him, and his supporting cast and all the characters you get introduced to view him as an individual. Great ride, tons of fun, tons of comedic relief, and also some action. And at the number 9 spot, we do have Step by Bloody Step. This is an Image title, and this was written by Cy Spurrier with art by Mateus Bergara. This is the creative team from Coda over there at Boom Studios, and man, was that story phenomenal as well. But this is one of the most interesting and different comic book experiences I've ever had. So the synopsis behind this story is it's about a girl and her guardian who is a hulking knight-like behemoth that protects her from a multitude of monsters and threats as they go on an adventure to complete a specific task. Now that sounds like a pretty basic story, but the way they go about telling this story is the unique part, because throughout this story you're going to notice very quickly that there's all of 3, maybe 4 speech bubbles throughout the entire story, and even those speech bubbles are not in any language that I'm aware of. Is not definitely not English or any other man-made language. Maybe it's some type of made-up language on the internet that I'm not aware of. So you have no speech bubbles, no narration bubbles, absolutely no dialogue steering the story. It is completely taking place through the art and paneling by Bergara, and man, does he do phenomenal. And it's almost a choose-your-own-adventure style of story where you're looking at the art, you're looking at the panels, and you're filling in the gaps when it comes to the interactions between the characters, the relationships between the characters, their motivations, why they're doing things, and it's just so cool to experience the differing opinions when it comes to those story elements. As soon as I finished the story, I immediately jumped on the internet and wanted to hear everybody's differing opinion on what this story's about, what the relationship between the girl and Guardian is, why the antagonist of the story is doing what he's doing. And lo and behold, we all had different opinions and different stories to tell. And that makes it one of the coolest comic book experiences I've ever had, because not only can you read this multiple times through your life as you grow and probably get different stories from each time, but you can also read this and pass it to a friend or a family member, and they're going to have completely different stories to you. And I think that is such an interesting way and really shows just how powerful art is and just how subjective it is also. And that's one of the things that I love about the medium of comic books in general. But this is also just a beautiful product. I think the art by Bergara is absolutely phenomenal. You really put together the emotion and the weight of the actions that are taking place. But one of the really, really cool aspects of the story is when you get to the extras and you find out that the script that Cy Spurrier provided to Bergara was very lacking in detail as well. So you have Bergara doing the same thing that we are doing while we're reading and filling in the details, the void and lack of story that's there through his art. So you're even getting his interpretation of the story. One of the coolest and most unique comic book experiences I've ever had, and I would love for you guys to read it and tell the community your story. At number 8, we do have Wonder Woman Dead Earth. This is a DC Black Label title also, and this is written and drawn by Daniel Warren Johnson with longtime collaborator Mike Spicer on colors. This is my second time reading this title, and I am here to confirm it still holds up. It doesn't matter if it's your first time or your second time, third, fourth, whatever it may be. This is a phenomenal story and goes to show why Daniel Warren Johnson is going to be a legendary name in comics. He's already a household name, even though he hasn't had a super long career in comics, but everyone knows just how capable he is as a storyteller and an artist. In this story, you're going to follow Diana Prince, Wonder Woman, as she wakes up in a post-apocalyptic wasteland after an apocalyptic event took place. And of course, she does have amnesia, and she is extremely depowered. So you get to follow her as a character as she runs into a new group of characters, a new society, a new formation of a multitude of groups, and then eventually possibly some familiar faces that may or may not be as familiar as they once were. And the best part is when you get to the reveal of the event and just how impactful that reveal is to the character of Wonder Woman and the world that you are now delving into, and you get to see those characters react to that reveal in real time as you react also. So such a phenomenal story. Of course, Daniel Warren Johnson is an incredible writer. He knows how to do character work, character progression. You have a lot of action through here where you see Wonder Woman taking on not only superpowered beings, but also some monsters. And then you have the very slow and quiet moments where you get to see the tenderness of the character and the character development take place. And then on top of that, you then have Mike Spicer's colors that just add another just chef's kiss to the art that you're seeing on panel and the story that you're seeing. And he just breathes so much life into the environments and the characters. and I just cannot emphasize enough just how incredible Daniel Warren Johnson is, and just how much he contributes to the character of Wonder Woman during this specific story, because you get to follow the embodiment of love and hope in a world that is lacking love and hope, and you get to follow her as she tries to decide what's the best route to go, how the best way to handle certain situations are, and how she's going to interact with the familiar faces or the new faces that she's going to run into as the story continues. And it's just one of those stories that gives Wonder Woman a level of depth, multiple layers to her character, makes her so human-like, very similar to anything Daniel Warren Johnson writes. It's just full of humanity. It makes the character of Wonder Woman a goddess relatable, and it's just so great. It looks great in this oversized format. You get oversized artwork, oversized panels, and it's just one of those Wonder Woman stories that's probably going to go down in history as one of the best, and it's probably my favorite Wonder Woman story, despite it being a DC Black Label title. So I do recommend reading it, especially if you're a Daniel Warren Johnson fan. But even if you're not, I still recommend checking it out because he's just such a legendary creator at this point. And at number 7, we do have Pulp. This is published by Image, and this is written by Ed Brubaker with art by Sean Phillips. This is the processed edition, which is a oversized hardcover with a lot of extras. Probably 3/4 of the book is extras, but man, is it the story that knocked my socks off. I read this and I didn't know exactly what to expect. This does follow the character of Max, and the setting is New York in 1939. And Max is a comic book creator with a very checkered past, but where Max really shines as a character is when you dive into his thought process behind what he is leaving behind, what's going to happen to these stories and adventures that he went on as a younger person, and what's going to happen to his loved ones once he's gone. So a lot of relatable factors that me and you probably worry about as individuals and actual humans that are not in a comic book. So it has that relatable factor to the character of Max that I really enjoyed. And then on top of that, you have some historical elements that have to do with the United States and the world during the time of 1939. But if I had to attach a genre to this specific story, I would call it more of a modernized Western. And I know Westerns are typically cowboys and shootouts and heists and things like that, but you do have that in this specific book. It's just not exactly set in the Wild West by any means, but you have all of the same Western goodness here. And then when you follow the character of Max and his progression through the story, the things that he contemplates and the things that he does, it is eventually leads to an ending that is quite literally perfect for the character. It is so satisfying, it's heartbreaking, it makes you want more but not want more simultaneously. It is just one of the best endings ever, and it gets even cooler when you realize that when you start the story, you're actually seeing the end of the story, and you're not exactly aware at the time until you read the book and get to the end, and then realize that that's what you were seeing. So one of the coolest journeys, and it's a very short story, very quick read. But you have Ed Brubaker doing his crime noir gritty style of storytelling, and Sean Phillips lending his gritty crime noir-esque art style, which obviously works beautifully together. This is not a slouch of a creator team by any means. This is a creative team that everybody absolutely loves, and I've only read, honestly, 2 titles that this team has put out, Pulp being my second, and I do have a New Year's resolution of checking out more titles by this creative team, so don't you worry about that. But I do have a review on this specific book also, so I can leave that up above. Again, a quick reminder, there are going to be some spoilers there because I do dive deep into the characters and story, but if you don't care or you just want to watch anyway, click away and enjoy. But one of the best books that I read this year for good reason, incredible creative team, and such a awesome ride. And at the number 6 spot, we do have Headlopper by Andrew McLean with colors by also Mike Spicer. This is going to be a theme you're going to notice on this list is creators that are double threats. They know how to tell stories and do art, so just keep track of that. That is something that very thoroughly impresses me in the comic book world, and that's exactly what you're going to have here. This is published by Image Comics, and it is a story that follows the character of Norgal, who's also known by the, I guess, label of the Headlopper, and that's mainly because he is a monster hunter that is very well known for chopping off the heads of the monsters that he comes across. And you follow Norgal as he's sent on a mission by a queen of a kingdom to find out what is the cause of the plague of beasts. And during this adventure, you're going to see tons of world building. You're going to adventure through this world that Andrew is building in front of your very eyes, even having pages that literally have a map where you're going to see landmarks and cities and other places that you may see throughout this story, may see in other volumes. I don't know, you got to read and find out. But you are going to see Norgal take on a multitude of fantasy-like creatures, from ghosts to ghouls to giants to serpents, dragon-like creatures, you name it, it makes an appearance in here. So it is a monster hunting style of story, very reminiscent to that of Witcher, if you're a fan of that. But one of the best parts about this specific story is where it takes itself overly serious when it comes to the plot itself. You then have some comedic relief through the supporting character that goes along with Norgal, Agatha, who is a witch's decapitated head that Norgal himself chopped off, and now decides to carry her around as essentially a weapon, where he uses her magic abilities or her laser eyes, or sometimes even smacks people in the head with her head during certain scenes. And she is very much a comedic relief and a likable character, despite her being very much at odds with the character of Norgal. They do not like each other, but they work together, well, somewhat work together, because Norgal's carrying her around and she has no body to do anything else otherwise. But she is such an awesome character. She throws quips, jokes, one-liners throughout the entire book, and she's probably my favorite character of this entire series. Andrew does a great job when it comes to the artwork. It is a very detailed yet lacking detail art style, and I know that may sound kind of confusing, but when you get into the book, you'll know exactly what I mean. He takes his time to portray these fight scenes, the choreography in the fight scenes, and the fluidity in these fight scenes, but some of those scenes there is some detail lacking, where it gives across a very stylistic style of art. And it is so much fun. The world building in this is phenomenal. The colors bounce off the page because it's Mike Spicer. But there is 3 volumes out at this point, I believe. I've only read volume 1, but I do plan to continue because I really, really enjoyed this read. And where it's like Witcher because of the monster hunter parts of the story, it differs because Norgal is very blunt and brutish. He does not have the charm that Geralt does in Witcher, but that is the charm of Norgal as a character, is that he is 100% on the nose and does not play around, and leans heavily into that unkillable hero trope that we see in comics so often, but in a fun way. So highly recommend it. It is so cool to see one person build this world full of this cast of characters, and it's one of those stories that I do recommend and hope it gets a better edition rather than just a trade paperback, because it is deserving of that. And here we are, my top 5 reads of 2024, and we are kicking it off at number 5 with Blade of the Immortal by Hiroki Samura. I do have this entire series collected in the Dark Horse Deluxe editions, which I highly recommend. It is the best way to read manga in my opinion. This is volume 10, which is the final volume of the series, so I did read all 10 volumes during 2024, and this is one of those books that as soon as it came in the mail, I was ripping open the box to continue my reading experience of this specific title because it is that good. So this story does follow Manji, who is a unkillable samurai, and a young girl by the name of Rin, as she hires Manji to hunt down members of the Ito Ryu, which is a sword school that no longer believes in the traditional thought process behind swordplay, and instead of getting acceptance by the world, they've decided to hunt down and kill all of the sword masters of all of the more traditional sword schools. This group is led by the character of Anatsu, who Rin has a personal vendetta with and wants to kill herself. Now that story, as cool as it probably sounds, is just scratching the surface, and you only touch on that story during maybe the first 2 deluxe edition volumes, and then after that, you dive into a multitude of other genres and other story elements, from mystery elements, supernatural elements, more governmental espionage and treachery style of story elements also, and it is so phenomenal and so well done. This is probably most famously known on my channel as the manga that I recommend to comic book readers the most, and that's for a multitude of reasons. First and foremost, it does read from left to right, and that is not because the panels are mirrored. That's because Hiroki Samura cut out each individual image and pasted them so there was no discrepancies to the story if you were to read it from left to right, which is insane, so cool, and you really see just how much this mangaka loves this title and wants people to be exposed to his story. But then on top of that, you also have a more comic booky style of art and storytelling and characters. For example, Manji, I always relate him to the character of Logan or Wolverine because of his nonchalant thought process behind killing and getting the job done, as well as him having pretty much a healing factor and being a undying samurai. But then on top of that, the art style that Hiroki Samura lends is very reminiscent of that of Jim Lee at times, where you have tons of momentum and movement and fluidity and cross-hatching when it comes to some of the details. So I do think this title would lend beautifully to you as a reader, whether you're a comic book reader or a manga reader, it doesn't really matter. I think you'll really enjoy the title itself. But man, does this story keep you on the edge of your seat. There is a specific storyline in here called The Den of Otters, I want to say. Could be wrong on that, but I believe it's called The Den of Otters, and that entire storyline is heart-pumping. It's heart-racing. You're on the edge of your seat. The hairs on your arm are standing up because there's just so much going on. It is such a blast. You meet even more characters that you care about, and no one is safe through this entire story. There's tons of action, and then there's also a historical element because this is set in feudal Japan, so you get to learn about the feudal Japanese society and the roles that a multitude of individuals play, and it's all using traditional words and labels to those characters, which is why it has a glossary in the back, so you can kind of know what exactly these characters are, and it is very easy to follow. I'm not a smart reader by any means, but I had no problem navigating the glossary and knowing what characters were and what role they played. But absolutely phenomenal. Characters that you hate, you may end up liking. Characters you like, you may end up hating. Has some of the best villains in all of manga and comics. People that you literally hate and want to see die, and you get so invested in these characters by either hating or loving them. So insane character work, great art, incredible pacing, and such a genre-bending story. I recommend it to absolutely everybody. Comic book reader, manga reader, whatever you are, it is a great starting manga. It's one you want to experience, and I need to get a review or overview out on this title because it is that good. And at number 4, we have Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. This is put out by IDW and written and drawn by Patrick Horvath. Now, this is such an interesting experience when it comes to comic books because this is another title that plays with the art and the story almost by doing the complete opposites, because in this story you are going to have a more childlike art style when it comes to the characters and how they're designed, but it is going to be a very much adult story. So this does follow Samantha the bear as she goes through her day-to-day life in a small town full of her friends, and they all help each other, they all love each other, they all take care of each other until one day during a parade, a grisly and brutal murder is revealed to the entire town. So of course, tons of mystery and fear ensues after that, and you get to follow through the lens of Samantha because she has some personal involvement to this murder and some personal stakes to this murder that took place, which I'm not going to dive into. And it is such a phenomenal story. Patrick Horvath absolutely knocks it out of the park when it comes to the detail of every single character, especially when it comes to the more brutal artwork through here during some of the more murderous and killing-like scenes, because these are animals that are being brutalized, killed, chopped up, whatever it may be, and you have Patrick Horvath quite literally painting out the entire anatomy of these creatures and putting so much thought into the anatomy of a duck or a pig or whatever animal it may be. And it is so interesting the level of detail that he applies to that. And then on top of that, you have those mystery horror elements where you don't really know who to trust, you don't know where the story is going to go, and it does end on such a satisfying note. But then you also have a vein or a vibe very similar to that of Dexter, the series. So if you are a fan of the show Dexter, like I am, you're going to love this, and maybe that reveals some details, but so be it. If that means you will read this title, then I'm willing to accept that, because it is so similar to that of Dexter to the point that I was quite literally painting some or hearing the voices of some of the characters as characters from the show. So really, really great stuff. Highly recommend it. I loved it so much I had the trade paperback and I upgraded to the standard size hardcover so I could have it in the display of the library. That's how much I loved it. I did double dip, which is a rare occasion here on the channel, but it's one of those stories where it's just so much fun to see that little bear childlike aesthetic that is typically geared towards children applied to a very, very adult story, and Patrick Horvath having so much fun with that. So read it if you're a fan of Dexter. It's a story I highly recommend, and I think tons of people in the community have been championing it for a long time, so maybe I'm late to the party, but it's time for you to read it also. And here we are at the top 3 reads of 2024, and we're starting it with a bang. We have Berserk Dark Horse Deluxe Edition Volume 14. This is by Kentaro Miura, and this is the most bittersweet experience I've ever had when it comes to comics or manga. This is the last work done by Kentaro Miura when it comes to his magnum opus, and dare I say manga's magnum opus, Berserk, his beloved Berserk, and it is so fitting yet painful to see what takes place in the story and how that was his last addition to the story, especially when it comes to that final panel where you have a massive reveal when it comes to one of the characters, and the page itself is almost art mirroring life, where it just brings a tear to your eye to see that final panel, and it's one of my favorite panels in not only manga but also comic books. But one of the coolest aspects about this story is we are reaching even more closer to the climax of the story, seeing Guts and his supportive party of Isidro, Puck, Shirky, Farnese, just to name a few, obtain a major goal that they set out to do all the way during the beginning of the story, and it is so emotional and impactful the way that it's depicted through the art and the imagery that is used to show not only this goal being achieved that has a lot to do with the character of Casca, but the way that her mind is painted, because you get to go on an adventure with Shirky and Farnese in their astral forms as they dive into Casca's mind and see how the trauma, the pain, the people that have caused some of the more fond memories of her life, but also some of the more painful memories of her life, how they're depicted in her mind and what they represent. And it is just so, so powerful. It hurts so good every single time. And Berserk, I've said before, and I'm going to say it until the day that I die, Berserk is the best manga, comic, anything that I've ever read. Berserk is also the best story when it comes to comics, manga, movies, TV shows, anime, whatever it may be, that I've ever experienced. It's a dark fantasy that has a massive cast of characters that you will grow to love or grow to hate. It has the best antagonist in all of manga or comics for sure, and it is just so phenomenal. And it is so bittersweet yet fitting that this is the last piece of Berserk that Kentaro Miura is lending from his mind and his hand. And that final panel, again, just hits so hard when you finally get to it. So please read Berserk. Please give it a chance. Manga reader or not, if somehow you've been living under a rock and you haven't tried it, give it a try. It is so good. Such an incredible ride. Such incredible character work and settings when it comes to the dark fantasy setting and action, adventure, everything you could want, including even romance. So good. One of the best things that is out there, and I highly recommend it to absolutely everyone out there. But please be of age, because there are some very traumatic things that Kentaro Miura tackles during this specific series. But please do yourself a favor and read Berserk. And at the number 2 spot, we have a title that could have just as easily been at the number 1 spot. Between the two titles of number 1 and number 2, they are neck and neck. But this is Monsters by Barry Windsor Smith. This is the oversized hardcover edition by Fantagraphics. I think there's a paperback edition out there, but just get the hardcover. This story is so deserving of it. But on a ground level, this is a story that follows the character of Bobby Bailey. But as you dive deeper into the story, you're going to realize that it follows the Bailey family as a whole, which consists of Bobby Bailey, his mother, and his father, and all of the characters that they've interacted with throughout their life and throughout history, and how their interactions with those characters changed those characters' trajectory throughout life. So it is a dialogue and narration on the thin red line theory, which I absolutely love. And as if that's not enough to get you interested in the story, we then have Barry Windsor Smith, who is a master storyteller, but also a master artist. Throughout this entire story, you're going to have incredibly detailed panels, very in-depth and layered characters, and settings that you feel like you are literally a part of and immersed into, to the point that you feel like you're just there watching this scene take place. Now, I do have a review on this specific book. It's a review I'm very proud of, so I can leave that link up above. Obviously, I do tons of spoilers and go pretty in depth when it comes to the story and characters, so tread carefully when it comes to spoilers. Be very careful, especially if you are going to read this. But I think this story is one of those books that I think everyone should read, so maybe hold off on the link. This is a title that should be held right next to titles like Watchmen or Swamp Thing or Incal, all of the greats of the comic book world. This should be in the same conversation because it is that phenomenal. I usually break down the story in 3 chapters, and each of those 3 chapters have their own genre, subgenre, and cast of characters. So it is so many bags of goodies that you get absolutely everything you could want out of one singular story. And then, of course, it's crafted by one man from one mind, and it's done masterfully. This book got a first-time rating for the channel, which I'm not going to reveal, and it is definitely worth that rating and 100% worth your time reading, because I think this should go down in history, if it's not going to, as one of the best graphic novels and comic books out there, and everybody should be talking about it and championing it and reading it, because it is really that good, that impactful, but dark and just horrendous in every single possible way, but full of humanity, and it is so phenomenal. It keeps you guessing, keeps you wondering about the characters and their morality, why they are the way that they are, whether they're bad or good. It is so phenomenal. Please read it. Please read it. But yeah, Monsters, Barry Windsor Smith, absolute masterpiece. And my top read of 2024, which maybe some of you may have seen during Omar's top reads of 2024 community video, is It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth by Zoe Thorogood and published by Image Comics. Very rarely we come across a story that is transformative to us as individuals. This is one of those stories for me. This is such a phenomenal story. It is a biography from Zoe Thorogood covering 9 months, I believe 9 months of her life during 2019, as she tackles mental health when it comes to anxiety and depression, relationships, and the imposter syndrome, wondering what she's going to leave behind, what will be her mark on the earth. And she does it in such a intricate, detailed, mature, and intimate way, and it is so phenomenal. There is so much ambition in this story, so many risks that she takes as a creator, from restarting the story mid-story, which is one of my favorite aspects and details about this specific book, to using a multitude of mediums, from photography to paint, pen, Sharpie, you name it. There's even a specific panel in here where she does a image of herself and quite literally uses every single medium on one panel, and it is so phenomenal, so incredible. There's so many lessons to be learned here. There's times where she breaks the fourth wall and talks to you as a reader. She's very intimate and opens up very heavily when it comes to her relationships and interactions in life, when it comes to whether romantic relationships or interactions with fans. And it is so good. This is one of the rare instances where like life imitates art, and something comes into your life right when you need it. Actually, just before filming this video, I was struggling myself with the imposter syndrome, wondering what is going to be my impact on this world, feeling like a cog in the wheel, just another person that's on this floating rock in space. And I flipped to the last panel while flipping through all of the books that I just got done talking about. And the final panels, the final speech bubbles just hit so hard. It was exactly what I needed to hear. It's just one of those stories that you can learn so much from it. And it's just so incredible that she's such a young girl, so early into her career. And she's so mature and intelligent, emotionally intelligent, when it comes to the topics that she discusses here. So good. One of those stories I recommend to everybody. I've been recommending to everybody since I've read it. I knew right away after I read it that it was going to be my read of the year. And it is just one of those rare instances where there's a story that is just so powerful and going to change you as a person. And that's exactly what this did. And because of that, I will be following Zoe Thorogood. No matter what she puts out, I will be checking it out and reading it, because she's easily one of my favorite creators in the comic book world currently. So read it. I'm a little late to the party. Don't be later than me. It's one of those stories you gotta read, you have to experience. It's such an amazing piece of art. So do yourself a favor and check it out. And that does wrap up today's video covering my top 10 reads of 2024. I appreciate you guys always watching and tuning in week after week. Leave comments down below and let me know what your top 10, top 20, top 5, top 3 reads of 2024 are. I love to hear what you all are reading. You guys put books on the radar for me as a collector, as a reader, but also I'd love to hear your opinions on the books that I just got done talking about, or books that I've maybe read in the past, because your opinions matter just as much as mine here on this channel and in this community. But if you are watching this and you are not a part of the community, you can hit that subscribe button to join. And while you're down there, you could do me a favor and hit that thumbs up icon and ring that bell for notifications. Both help out the algorithm drastically and in turn help the channel grow. So thank you for doing that. And once again, I appreciate you guys watching, and of course, stay nerdy.